5th Hour Radio Show.
So, Terry, I like to start off all shows getting to know, our guests' beginnings. So, where are you originally from, and what sparked your interest in music and learning to play and write your own songs?
Well, I'm originally from Paducah, Kentucky, and that's where I've made my home all my life. But I don't know, the inspiration for me to start singing and performing and playing, I guess, was when I was just a little kid, just a child. My dad had a jukebox in his restaurant, and this was back in the late 50s. Mm-hmm. And I was especially drawn to Elvis songs, Elvis Presley. And so I was singing not just his songs, but other songs from that era. Stuff that little kids would sing, like He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, but other stuff too. I was really, really crazy about Elvis, and so I was singing stuff like Teddy Bear and All Shook Up when I was just 3 and 4 years old. Standing there at his jukebox, I'd get people to play those songs on a jukebox, and then I'd jump up on a table and show out a little bit.
You're a natural performer.
I guess, because that's what I wanted to do from the get-go.
Can you remember the first song you ever learned how to play?
Well, no, I didn't start the guitar till I was 5, so I sang there a couple of years just with a record player or a jukebox or whatever I could come up with. But I did actually sing on stages when I was 3 and 4. My dad would take a little portable record player backstage and hold a microphone on the speaker, and I would sing along with it. We didn't have karaoke in those days.
Mm-hmm,
so.
Yeah.
But the first song I remember actually honestly singing was All Shook Up by Elvis. I remember singing Running Bear and He's Got the Whole World in His Hands and some other stuff too. But by the time I turned 5, I think when I started playing the guitar, it was kind of slow at first. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of a song at that age. I remember...
That's really young. Yeah, it's hard to remember when you're...
Well, I do remember learning a song very, very early on the guitar called Raunchy, which was a hit for a guy named Bill Justice down in Memphis. It was a guitar instrumental song. It had saxophone and stuff in it too. But the one lick on the guitar, I remember working really hard on that. And my fingers were little bitty fingers, and trying to lasso that, but I finally did accomplish it. But
now, was you learning how to play on a full-size guitar?
Well, I called it a full-size. It seemed really big to me at the time, but I still have that original guitar, and it's a little smaller than most of my other guitars. So I guess that's why my parents chose that guitar. We went shopping for guitars, and I think they thought that I would do better with that one because it was a little bit smaller. The frets and the neck and everything were a little smaller, and they were right. I probably did learn a little faster because it was a smaller guitar.
Yeah, that's really neat that you got that original guitar you learned on.
I've never let it go, man. I don't think I would take anything in the world for it.
Yeah, I bet. Were you always confident in your vocals starting out? I mean, as far as you can remember, was that something that you had to work on to perfect, or were you just a natural at it?
I don't know, Rob. I don't really recall worrying about it. I just recall loving it, and I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember worrying about it. I think I did work at it, and then when I became old enough to realize that it's not necessarily a good idea to try to sound like just one guy, because I was all about Elvis. I think when I was a little bit older, I realized, I want to try to sound like me, whoever that is. And but I had such strong influences. I did have a tendency to sing whatever song I was singing as much like the record sound as I could get, regardless of who the artist was.
Now, starting out that young, were you able to ever work out the jitters? I mean, do you ever remember being nervous on stage?
Funny thing, I don't remember being nervous at all when I was a kid. I couldn't wait to get out there. But then later on, as an adult, there have been moments that I would get nervous for one reason or another.
Yeah, I mean, do you still get jitters before playing, or has your experience, did away with those type of feelings?
I don't so much now, but there was a stretch there probably in my 20s, 30s when something really special would come along that we would be doing, and I remember getting nervous for that. And back in the 90s, I was on this network television show. Well, it was a cable network, the Nashville Network. I was on a Crook and Chase TV show on a routine basis. I was what I guess you could call a regular on that show. It was called Music City Tonight. For some reason, knowing that was live TV, I did get nervous a little bit on that show several times. And because it's one of those things where, boy, if you mess up, you can't go back.
Yeah, there's no editing process there.
Right. And that's the way the telethon is. It's live. And the Nashville Network was all across the country. So that was a little bit... I think I remember being a little nervous at some of those. And they would have me do 2 songs each show, and sometimes I was doing like 3 of those shows a week. So I was having to learn songs that I wasn't that familiar with. Some of the songs I was, but some things that I had never done before. And I remember being a little worried that I was going to forget words or whatever. And,
Well, do you have that one defining moment in your career that you think really put your name on the map and made, Terry, Mike, Jeffrey, a name people recognized when they heard it?
Well, you know what? I don't really have one defining moment. I think it was just a culmination of years, putting it together and just working at it, working hard. I had a record on the radio just here locally in Paducah when I was 14 that actually caught on pretty good. It took us by surprise, and I remember thinking at that time that was possibly a defining moment, but now looking back on that, probably not so much.
You've had many defining moments.
I've had some moments that were very good for me, yes, and some moments that were not so good. I think everybody goes through that, though. That pursues this full time.
Yeah, especially musicians.
There's going to be some good moments and some bad moments too.
Now, I'm sure you've had many influences musically. You spoke of Elvis many times so far that you incorporate into your playing. Do you still find yourself being influenced by other musicians, maybe even newer musicians at this point in your career?
Yeah. I love Bruno Mars, for example. I'm really crazy about his music, and he's a current now artist. But along the way, I mean, gosh, I was influenced strongly by the Beatles. When the Beatles happened, I was 10 years old, and by that time I had been playing the guitar for 5 years and singing for 7 years. And I remember when the Beatles came out, I was just blown away by them at that age, and they alerted me to, hey, maybe instead of doing this by myself, I should put a band together, which is what I did. That's because of the Beatles. I started putting I'd get a drummer and a bass guitar player and start putting a band together.
I want to move forward a little bit and talk about your involvement with the Lions Club Telethon of Stars. How many years now have you been involved with the fundraiser?
Rob, I can't tell you exactly. I can tell you that since 1993, I've only missed 1 year. Or I'm sorry, since 92, I've missed 1 year. But before 1992, it was sporadic. I was on 1 year and not on the next, and that kind of thing. But I remember being on the telethon when I was about 8 or 9 years old for the first time.
In my opinion, I think the telethon consistently has upped its game, so to speak, from humble beginnings, from small studios to now being broadcast from the Carson Center. What's your take on being a part of that? What's it like performing at a place like the Carson Center?
Oh, it's great. I love the Carson Center. We actually, before they started having the telethon in the Carson Center, we did, speaking of the Beatles, we've done several shows with symphony orchestras across the country, and including some here in Paducah. And one that I did in 2003, a few years before they started the telethon at the Carson Center, was a tribute to the Beatles with the Paducah Symphony Orchestra, and that was at the Carson Center. And that was the first time that I played there, and that was a big crowd, and it was great. And now with the telethon, we get to play the Carson Center every year, and it's very nice. And it reminds me a lot of a place in Memphis that we do an annual concert with the Memphis Symphony Orchestra down there. It's called the Cannon Center. I get the two names confused, but the Cannon Center in Memphis is maybe a little bit larger, but it's on that same scale. It's got the big high ceiling balconies, and it's just the state of the art, like the Carson Center is.
Like the acoustics, the acoustics there are just so fantastic.
They're just about as perfect as they can be.
Yeah. Now, not only are you able to showcase your music on television, with the telethon, you're also using your talent to raise money for a great cause. How gratifying is it to be able to meet these children face to face and know that you're using your God-given talent in such a way, to help these kids?
Oh man, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like the feeling that you get when you see their faces light up, and we see repeatedly year after year some of the same faces, and they light up every year, and this is such a huge big deal for them, and I'm glad to see that they get some pleasure out of that.
Yeah. Do you have any memorable moments that stand out after all these years of being a part of the telethon? Any famous people? Any funny stories? Anything like that?
We have been fortunate over the years to actually perform literally with some people during the telethon. For example, Boots Randolph was on a few years ago, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, Boots," I said, "you played saxophone on a lot of Elvis's records." I said, "What if we played a blues song that you did with Elvis, but you play with us?" And he did, and that went over really big. So much so that a few hours later, we had people call in and request that we do the song again. So we did repeat it. But
wow, an encore performance. That's pretty cool.
yeah. The same thing happened with Steve Warner. He's such a nice guy, and we've performed alongside with him. Like when my band would be on stage, we would call Steve over, and he would play guitar with us. And the same thing happened with Ricky Skaggs. That's one of the coolest things to me, is that those people, even though they're famous, they've got a big name, they will leave their own band, their own comfort zone, and come and play along with you. And I think that's really admirable for them to do that. It just kind of gives the people watching the show a little something extra, I think, when something like that happens.
Well, how do you go about choosing what songs you're going to perform each year? Do you mix up covers with originals, or how do you, as a performer, how do you pick the perfect songs?
Well, we try to mix it up, and we try to do some original things, but I think that it's important to go ahead and target the audience and the listeners and things that they might be familiar with, and try to. We just do a little bit of a mix. Mm-hmm. And every year I get requests for, make sure you do some Elvis songs, that kind of thing. And so I'll make sure I include some of those, because we get a lot of requests for those. But we mix it up, we mix it up quite a bit.
So, Terry, what do you do besides music? I mean, do you have any hobbies, TV shows you like, a sports fan or anything like that?
I'm a baseball fan. I have a hobby that I've had for probably 35 years or more, and that is collecting records, vinyl records.
Oh, and they're making a big comeback now.
Yeah. I collect from the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the original, like picture sleeves, certain artists, Elvis and the Beatles, and some of the groups from the 60s that came out following the Beatles, and some of the artists that were big in the late 50s, like Chuck Berry and the Everly Brothers, people like that. I collect their records and the original picture sleeves that came with them. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, I have some rental properties here in McCracken County that keep me pretty busy when I'm home. And I'm not sure how I got into that, but anyway, I did.
Kind of fell into that. Well, I mean, that's a good hobby, though. I mean, anytime you're making money, it's a good hobby.
Yeah.
So what's coming up for you in the near future? Any projects you're working on besides the telethon? Any new albums, new songs, anything like that?
I have a series of albums that I've done over the years called Raised on Elvis. There's volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it's just Elvis fans that follow us. You know, we've got a big Elvis following, and we do a lot of work with Graceland. And I've got Volume 7 coming up, I think, about Christmas time. And I just played in Paris, France a week ago yesterday, Monday a week ago in Paris with Elvis's former bandmates. And I do a lot of shows with those guys. And they're called the TCB Band. And we've done dates over there before, but this one was just last week. And then my wife and I were in Alaska about a month ago performing on a cruise ship up there. That was on our bucket list to go to Alaska, and finally we got to do that. And earlier this year, my band and I were in Hawaii performing. So we've been very blessed, you know, very fortunate to get to do some really neat things like that. And but coming up, I'm going to be, as of this week, staying home quite a bit more, and throughout the end of the year, I'm going to be a part of some shows at the Badgett Playhouse Theater, which is in Grand Rivers, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And I've done some shows with them earlier this year and really enjoyed. I like musical theater a whole lot, and acting and that kind of thing. And back in the late '80s, my wife and I were both in a touring Broadway musical out of New York City, so I'm kind of fond of that. And also, again, in the early 2000, 2001, and 2, 3, she and I were both involved in a country music show, the Tammy Wynette Story. Stand By Your Man was the name of it. Mm-hmm. And that was in Nashville at the Ryman Auditorium. So we like musical theater a whole lot, too. And that's kind of what
it sounds like you deserve some time off.
Yeah, so, but I'll be involved in their Christmas show at the Badgett Playhouse through all of November and December, which will keep me pretty busy, but at the same time, it keeps me home, too. It's 20 minutes to drive from my house to that theater, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, let our listeners know about your website or your social media that people can go check out and learn a little bit more about you, the things I haven't covered.
Okay. I have a website. It's www.terrymike.com, and it has our schedule on there and tons of pictures and the history of what I've done, you know, in my band and all the bands I've had over the years. There's pictures on there from when I was singing on stage at 3 all the way to my trip to Paris last week. So you get to see us with the electric 80s hair and the 70s jumpsuits. We look like the Osmonds or somebody in those pictures. But there's a lot of pictures. And
well, you got to keep up with the trends.
Oh yeah. And then there's a page on my website of us, like we were talking a while ago, performing on stage with people like Boots Randolph. And I actually got to meet Elvis, my hero, you know. Yeah. Back when I was 15, and there are some pictures of me with him on my website when I was 15 years old, meeting him.
That had to be an awesome experience.
Oh, the highlight of my young life, anyway. And
did you say anything to him? Did he say anything to you?
Yeah, I had a few minutes to talk to him, and he was really very, very nice. And I told him, you know, that he was such an influence on me, and that I was a guitar player. And by that time, I was also playing piano and saxophone. And we talked music, and I had just seen his concert, and I was backstage meeting him, which that was at a pivotal time in his career. It was at that in 1969 when he was making that comeback to, you know, live performing versus the movies. Mm-hmm. And he seemed really thrilled to be back on stage again after all those years of just doing movies.
Well, Terry, man, I really appreciate you taking time out and joining me today.
I'm very happy to talk to you, Rob.
All right.
Thanks for calling me.
Yep, you have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.